A quiet American winter. Have you ever noticed how silence can be louder than noise, especially when you're trying to learn English and wondering if you're already too late to start? Again. This video is not about grammar tricks or miracle methods. It's about a winter in the United States, my first Christmas alone, the cold weather, the quiet houses, and the strange warmth that slowly appeared where I didn't expect it. If you feel tired, stuck, or ready to give up on learning English, stay with me, this story might be speaking for you. The first thing you learn about winter in America is not the temperature. It's the stillness. In the region where I stayed these past 4 weeks, winter doesn't shout. It whispers. The sky looks pale, the streets feel wider. And people walk faster, heads down, hands buried in pockets like they're protecting something fragile. On my first morning, I opened the door and the cold air hit my face, not aggressively, but firmly, like a quiet reminder, you are far from home now. If you're learning English, your brain does something similar. It goes quiet. Not peaceful quiet, an awkward one. The kind where you know words exist somewhere in your head, but they don't come out when you need them. Neuroscience calls this cognitive overload. When your brain feels unsafe or uncertain, it limits output. You stop speaking. You start listening too carefully. You become silent, just like those winter streets. I remember standing outside a small grocery store, snow piled at the corners. Automatic doors opening and closing with a soft hiss. Inside, people spoke English fast, casually, without effort. My brain caught maybe 60%. Enough to survive. Not enough to feel confident. And that's when many learners quit, not because they are lazy, but because their nervous system decides that silence is safer than embarrassment. Climate affects behavior. That's not philosophy, it's research. Studies in environmental psychology show that colder climates often create more personal space, fewer casual conversations, and stronger boundaries. In warmer countries, people talk more, touch more, explain more. In winter America, no one is rude, but no one rescues you either. If you don't speak, the world keeps moving. That was my first lesson. Not about English. About responsibility. At night, the cold becomes emotional. The heating system hums softly, like it's trying not to wake anyone. Windows reflect your own face back at you. This is where motivation usually disappears. When you're alone, tired, and far from familiar sounds, your brain asks a brutal question. Why are we even doing this? Psychologists call this the meaning gap. When effort is high and meaning feels low, humans disengage. This is why so many people start learning English with excitement and stop quietly after a few weeks. No drama. Just a slow fade. Winter makes that fade easier. But something interesting happened to me during those first days. Because the outside world was so quiet, I started hearing English differently. Slower. Clearer. I wasn't chasing fluency. I was surviving moments. Ordering food. Answering simple questions. Saying yes, no, thank you, like small anchors in a cold sea. Language learning research confirms this. The brain learns better under low-pressure repetition. Short, emotional, real-life interactions create stronger memory than long study sessions. In winter, life naturally slows down. And that slowness, if you let it, can become your advantage. Every evening, I took short walks. The air smelled clean, almost empty. Christmas lights appeared early, glowing against the dark like quiet encouragement. Houses looked warm from the outside, but distant. In American culture, especially in colder regions, home is private. You don't drop by. You don't assume. Warmth is earned, not offered automatically. This affects learners deeply. Many people expect language environments to welcome them. But in reality, English in the US doesn't reach out, it waits. And if you don't speak, it doesn't chase you. That sounds harsh, but it's honest. And honesty is more useful than motivation quotes. One night, I sat alone, practicing simple sentences out loud. Slowly. Clearly. It is cold today. I am learning English. Nothing impressive. But something shifted. I wasn't performing. I was participating, even if no one was listening. Linguists call this self-directed output. And it's one of the strongest predictors of speaking improvement. Winter teaches patience. Not the inspirational kind, the stubborn kind. The kind where progress is invisible, but happening anyway. Trees look dead in winter, but underground, roots are busy. Your English works the same way. If you feel behind, if you feel quiet, if your learning feels cold and lonely, good. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're in winter. And winter is not the end of the story. It's the season that prepares everything else. By the end of that first week, I didn't feel warm yet. But I felt steady. And sometimes, steadiness is the first form of hope. My first Christmas alone. Christmas in America doesn't arrive quietly. It shows up early, loud, and everywhere, on coffee cups, radio ads, front lawns, even inside gas stations. And yet, my first Christmas here felt strangely empty. Not dramatic empty. Just hollow. Like a room after everyone has left, but the lights are still on. If you've ever felt lonely while surrounded by celebration, you already understand this part of the story. The week before Christmas, people became faster and friendlier at the same time. Cashiers said, "Happy Holidays," automatically. Neighbors waved, but didn't stop. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere meaningful. I wasn't. And that contrast, that sharp difference between collective joy and personal silence, is where motivation often breaks. Especially when you're learning English and already feel like you're watching life through glass. Psychologists have a term for this: social comparison stress. When you see others celebrating something you're not part of, your brain interprets it as exclusion, even if no one is actually excluding you. For language learners, this hits harder during holidays. You hear conversations you can't fully join, jokes you half understand, traditions you don't share. Your brain quietly decides, stay quiet, stay safe. On Christmas Eve, I went for a walk. The streets were clean, almost polished. Snow softened every sound. Houses glowed from the inside, warm yellow light spilling through windows. You could see families moving around, someone setting the table, kids running, a dog waiting near the door. It looked like a movie scene. A beautiful one. And that somehow made it worse. This is the moment many people quit, not just language learning, but entire dreams. Because loneliness plus effort feels pointless. The brain asks, who is this for? And if you don't have an immediate answer, motivation collapses. But here's the part no one tells. Your brain is lying to you a little. Neuroscience shows that emotional intensity, even sadness, actually increases memory formation. When you're alone, your senses sharpen. Sounds feel clearer. Words stick longer. That Christmas night, I noticed English everywhere. On TV ads. On greeting cards. On text messages, I didn't know how to reply to properly. Instead of avoiding it, I leaned in. I cooked a simple dinner. Nothing special. And I talked to myself in English while doing it. Slowly. On purpose. I am cutting vegetables. The water is boiling. It sounds silly. But research on language acquisition shows that narrating actions helps connect vocabulary to physical memory. Your brain remembers what your body is doing. Later, I sat on the couch and watched a Christmas movie, no subtitles. Not to understand everything. Just to listen. Tone. Rhythm. Emotion. Linguists call this comprehensible input, at the edge of understanding. You don't need to catch every word. You need to feel the story. Outside, fireworks started. Some neighborhoods celebrate Christmas Eve loudly. Inside, I felt quiet again. But this time, the quiet didn't scare me. It felt chosen. And that's an important shift. Loneliness hurts most when it feels imposed. When you reframe it as a temporary state, something you're passing through, it loses power. Christmas morning arrived without ceremony. No alarms. No messages waiting. I made coffee and stood by the window. The snow reflected light, like it was trying to be helpful. I thought about family. About love. About how different marriage and relationships feel here. In the US, especially in colder regions, independence is respected more than togetherness. People don't assume emotional access. They wait for permission. That cultural difference matters for learners. In many countries, people correct you, help you, guide you. In America, silence often means respect, not rejection. But your brain doesn't know that. It interprets silence as failure. Understanding this changed everything for me. I realized something that morning. I wasn't alone because I lacked English. I was alone because I was between chapters. And chapters are, by definition, temporary. So I set one rule for myself that day, no pressure, but no avoidance. I didn't force study. I didn't quit either. I spoke English out loud once an hour. One sentence. Honest. Simple. I feel lonely today. It is Christmas. I am still here. This is called spaced repetition with emotional relevance, and it's incredibly effective. By afternoon, I took another walk. The streets were quieter than ever. No traffic. No rush. Just footprints in the snow. I felt something unexpected, not happiness, but warmth. Not from people. From continuity. From showing up, even when no one was watching. If you're listening to this and thinking, that's me. I'm learning English alone. I feel behind. Good. You're not broken. You're in a quiet chapter. And quiet chapters build strong characters. That was my first Christmas alone in America. It didn't fix me. But it didn't break me either. And sometimes, that's the real miracle. Weather shapes feelings. Have you ever wondered why your motivation disappears on cloudy days? Or why learning English feels harder when the sky looks heavy? This is not laziness. It's biology. And I didn't truly understand that until I started paying attention to the weather in America, how different regions breathe differently, feel differently, and quietly shape the emotions of the people living there, including me. In the past 4 weeks, I noticed something subtle but powerful. On sunny days, my English flowed better. Words came out faster. I smiled more when speaking. On gray, cold days, everything slowed down, not just my body, but my thoughts. At first, I blamed myself. Then I learned the truth. Climate doesn't just affect your mood. It affects your brain's ability to learn language. Neuroscientists have found that sunlight increases serotonin, a chemical that stabilizes mood and improves cognitive flexibility. In simple terms, when there's light, your brain becomes more playful with language. When it's dark and cold, your brain shifts into survival mode. It prioritizes safety over creativity. That's why speaking a foreign language feels scarier in winter. Your brain is trying to protect you. In the US, climate differences are dramatic. The West Coast feels open and relaxed. The South feels warm and expressive. The Northeast and Midwest, where winter can be long and sharp, feel more reserved. People don't talk less because they are cold emotionally. They talk less because the environment teaches efficiency. Say what matters. Save energy. Go home. As a learner, this can feel like rejection. You try to speak English, and the response is short. Polite, but brief. No extra encouragement. No correction. Just efficiency. If you don't understand this cultural climate connection, you might assume you're doing something wrong. You're not. You're just learning English in a region where words are treated like winter coats, useful, but not decorative. One afternoon, the temperature dropped suddenly. The air felt tight. Even sounds traveled differently. I went into a cafe and ordered coffee. The barista smiled, took my order, and moved on. No small talk. No warmth. I walked out thinking, my English is bad today. But later, I noticed something. No one else was chatting either. The weather had turned everyone inward. This matters for your learning strategy. When the environment is emotionally closed, you must create warmth intentionally. That doesn't mean forcing conversation. It means adjusting expectations. On cold days, listening becomes more powerful than speaking. Your brain absorbs rhythm, pronunciation, and structure better when it's not pressured to perform. Language acquisition. Studies support this. In low-energy states, passive input, listening, reading slowly, builds deep neural connections. In high-energy states, active output, speaking, improvising, works better. Winter is for planting roots, not showing leaves. I began to change how I practiced. On cold mornings, I listened. Short audio. Slow stories. No multitasking. I let English wash over me while making breakfast or staring out the window. I didn't repeat everything. I didn't check every word. I trusted exposure. And something strange happened. By evening, words surfaced naturally. Without effort. Weather also affects memory. Cold temperatures increase focus, but reduce emotional warmth. This is why winter memories feel clear but distant. I used that. I attached English phrases to physical sensations. Cold air meant phrases like, "It's freezing today." Gray skies meant, "I feel a little low." This is called embodied learning, connecting language to physical experience. It's one of the most effective methods for long-term retention. Culturally, Americans often underestimate how much weather shapes personality. They talk about being busy or being tired, but rarely about seasonal emotional shifts. In colder regions, people plan their emotional lives around seasons. Holidays become crucial. Warmth is scheduled. That's why Christmas matters so much here. It's not just tradition. It's psychological survival. Understanding this helped me stop fighting the season. Instead of asking, "Why am I less motivated?" I asked, "What is this season good for?" Winter was good. For listening. For reflecting. For slow, honest English. Not perfect sentences. Real ones. One evening, snow started falling unexpectedly. Big, quiet flakes. The world softened again. I stood outside and whispered English sentences to myself, watching my breath turn into clouds. No one heard me. And that was okay. Speaking doesn't need an audience to count. If you're learning English and feel stuck during certain times, certain weather, certain moods, stop blaming yourself. Ask better questions. What is this environment teaching me? How can I learn with it, not against it? Weather shapes feelings. Feelings shape learning. And learning, when done gently, reshapes identity. By the end of that week, I didn't feel fluent. But I felt aligned. And alignment beats motivation. Every time. Culture shock in silence. Have you ever been surrounded by people, yet felt invisible, like you're present, but not fully seen or heard? That feeling hit me hard in America. Not because people were rude, but because they were quiet in a way I wasn't prepared for. This was my real culture shock. Not food. Not language. Silence. In many places, silence means something is wrong. Someone is angry. Someone is judging you. Someone is unhappy. But in large parts of the United States, especially during winter, silence often means respect. Privacy. Emotional distance that isn't cold, it's intentional. And if you don't understand that, your brain fills the gap with fear. During my first weeks here, I noticed how little people explained themselves. No long stories. No background. Just facts. I'll be late. It's cold today. See you tomorrow. At first, I thought my English wasn't good enough to unlock deeper conversation. But then I watched native speakers do the same thing with each other. Short. Clean. Quiet. Anthropologists call this a low-context culture. In low-context cultures like the US, meaning is carried by words, not by shared assumptions or emotional cues. People say exactly what they mean, and nothing more. For learners from high-context cultures, where meaning lives between the lines, this feels empty. Even hostile. Your brain reacts fast to this mismatch. It scans for social feedback and finds nothing. No encouragement. No correction. No emotional signal. So it assumes danger. Neuroscience shows that when feedback is unclear, the brain activates threat detection. You become cautious. You speak less. You withdraw. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is trying to protect you. I remember sitting in a small waiting room, just me and another person. 10 minutes passed. No greeting. No small talk. Just the hum of a heater. My mind raced. Did I do something wrong? Is my English bad? Should I say something? That mental noise is exhausting. And exhaustion kills language learning. This is why so many people struggle to practice English in the US. They are not lacking vocabulary. They are misreading silence. American silence is often neutral. Sometimes kind. Sometimes busy. People assume autonomy. They assume you'll speak if you want to. They won't pull words out of you. That's not rejection. That's consent culture applied to conversation. Once I understood this, everything softened. I stopped waiting for invitations. I stopped interpreting quiet as judgment. And ironically, that made me speak more. When you don't feel evaluated, your brain relaxes. When your brain relaxes, language flows. Psycholinguistics backs this up. Anxiety reduces working memory, the system responsible for forming sentences in real time. Lower anxiety equals better speaking. Silence, when reinterpreted as safety, becomes a gift. I tested this intentionally. I spoke first. Simple. Calm. No performance. Hi. Cold today. Long day. Sometimes the response was short. Sometimes longer. Sometimes none. And that was okay. The goal wasn't conversation. It was exposure. Repetition. Breaking the association between silence and fear. Culturally, Americans often separate emotional life from public space. Feelings are shared with close circles, not strangers. This makes public interactions efficient, but emotionally flat. For learners, this can feel lonely. But it also removes pressure. No one expects you to be entertaining, or fluent, or interesting. They expect clarity. Clarity is learnable. I started practicing what I call silent confidence. Standing comfortably without filling space. Speaking when I had Something to say. Letting pauses exist. Linguists note that native speakers are comfortable with pauses. Learners rush to fill them. But pauses are powerful. They give your brain time. They signal confidence, even when you're still learning. One afternoon, I ordered food and paused mid-sentence, searching for a word. I didn't apologize. I waited. The cashier waited too. Calmly. No rush. That pause taught me more than a perfect sentence ever could. It taught me that I was allowed to exist imperfectly in English. This changed my marriage conversations too. Cultural silence showed up there as well. In the US, partners often don't narrate emotions constantly. They expect direct requests, not emotional guessing. Learning this reduced misunderstandings, and gave me new English skills rooted in honesty, not performance. If you're learning English and feel ignored, ask yourself, am I being rejected or respected? That question alone can unlock weeks of progress. Silence is not empty. It's unclaimed space. And once you stop fearing it, you can step into it with your own words. That was my culture shock, not noise, but quiet. And learning to live inside that quiet made my English stronger, steadier, and real. Love across distance. Have you ever loved someone so much that distance didn't break the relationship, but slowly changed the way you speak, listen, and even think? That's what happened to me here in America. Love didn't disappear. It stretched. And stretching, I learned, can hurt more than breaking, especially when your second language becomes the bridge holding everything together. When people talk about long-distance love, they usually focus on time zones and missed calls. But the quiet truth is this: distance rewires communication. You don't just miss a person. You miss the ease of being understood without explaining yourself. And when English is not your first language, that loss hits twice. In the US, communication is direct. Feelings are often packaged into clear sentences, not gestures. I'm tired. I need space. Let's talk later. These sentences sound simple, but they require emotional precision. In long-distance love, vague language creates fear. And fear is the enemy of learning, both emotional and linguistic. Neuroscience explains why. When emotional uncertainty increases, the brain activates the amygdala, reducing access to the language centers responsible for fluency. You freeze. You overthink. You choose safe words instead of honest ones. Love becomes cautious. English becomes smaller. I felt this every time we talked. Video calls helped, but they also exposed the gaps. Delays. Misheard tones. Pauses that felt heavier than silence. In my native language, I could soften emotions. In English, everything felt sharper. Direct. Almost too honest. But here's the thing. American culture values clarity over comfort. In relationships, especially marriages, people expect needs to be stated, not sensed. This is not emotional coldness. It's emotional responsibility. And learning this changed how I loved, and how I learned English. One night, after a long day, I almost avoided a call. Not because I didn't care, but because speaking English when emotional felt dangerous. Words might come out wrong. Tone might fail. But avoidance creates distance faster than any mistake. Psychologists call this protective withdrawal. It feels safe short-term, but it erodes connection. So I tried something different. I spoke slowly. I named feelings simply. I feel lonely today. I miss you. I don't have many words. But I want to talk. No poetry. No perfection. Just presence. Language researchers confirm that emotional authenticity improves communicative confidence. When your goal shifts understanding, not performance, fluency increases naturally. The brain relaxes. Vocabulary expands. Meaning matters more than grammar. Distance also taught me something uncomfortable. Love doesn't translate automatically. You have to translate it into words, into actions, into time. In English, I had to choose verbs carefully. Support instead of fix. Listen instead of solve. These distinctions matter deeply in American relationship culture. I began using English as a tool for emotional alignment. Short messages. Clear intentions. No guessing games. This wasn't just good for love, it was incredible language practice. Real stakes create real learning. Every sentence mattered. Every misunderstanding taught me something. One week, we disagreed about something small. Normally, that would spiral. This time, I paused and said, I think we are hearing different meanings. That sentence saved us. It also became one of my favorite English phrases. Neutral. Calm. Powerful. Cognitive linguistics shows that naming misunderstandings reduces emotional escalation. You step outside the problem and observe it together. This is a deeply American communication strategy and an incredibly useful one for learners. Distance didn't weaken love. It stripped it down. Forced us to rely on clarity instead of closeness. And clarity is learnable. I noticed something else. The more honest my English became, the less lonely I felt, even when alone. Because I was connected. Not perfectly. But truthfully. Love across distance doesn't need constant words. It needs reliable ones. If you're learning English and navigating love, especially marriage or long-distance relationships, don't aim for beautiful language. Aim for usable language. Language that shows up when emotions are heavy. That's the kind that sticks. By the end of that month, my English hadn't become romantic. It became real. And real language holds relationships together when distance tries to pull them apart. Love didn't travel with me to America. But it met me halfway, in words I learned to choose carefully. Marriage under pressure. Have you ever noticed how marriage doesn't break during big disasters, but during quiet, ordinary days when no one is watching? That's what I learned in America. Not through arguments or dramatic moments, but through pressure. Slow pressure. The kind that builds when two people are adapting to a new country, a new culture, and a shared language that still feels slightly borrowed. In the US, marriage is treated less like a romantic shelter and more like a partnership system. Love matters, of course. But structure matters more. Schedules, responsibilities, emotional boundaries. No one tells you this directly. You feel it in the questions people ask. Have you talked about it? What's the plan? Did you tell them how you feel? These questions assume something important, that adults communicate clearly, even when it's uncomfortable. For someone learning English, that expectation can feel brutal. Back home, marriage often breathes through context, tone, silence, shared history. In America, marriage speaks out loud, directly, with words that don't hide. When pressure arrives, and it always does, English becomes more than a language. It becomes the container for your relationship. Pressure came quietly for us. Different routines, different emotional rhythms, different ways of handling stress. I noticed how often misunderstandings weren't about feelings, but about assumptions. I assumed my effort was visible. American culture assumes effort should be verbalized. If you don't say it, it may not count. Psychology explains why this is hard. Under stress, humans revert to their default communication style. If your default language is not English, your emotional range shrinks when pressure rises. You say less. You simplify. And your partner may read that as distance, not limitation. That's where marriage gets tested, not by lack of love, but by lack of shared language habits. One evening, we disagreed about something small again. Not important enough to fight over. Not small enough to ignore. In my head, I was processing slowly, searching for the right English words. In that pause, tension grew. Silence meant different things to each of us. To me, it meant thinking. To them, it meant withdrawal. This is where many marriages crack. But instead of rushing, I said something new. Slowly. Clearly. I need time to think in English. That sentence changed everything. It wasn't perfect grammar. But it was honest. And honesty reduces pressure faster than fluency ever could. Marriage researchers talk about metacommunication, talking about how you talk. This skill is especially powerful for bilingual couples. When you explain your process, not just your feelings, your partner stops guessing. Guessing is exhausting. Guessing creates resentment. American marriage culture values explicit needs. Not because people are selfish, but because clarity is considered respectful. You don't expect your partner to read your mind. You give them the map. Learning this felt uncomfortable at first. It felt like removing emotional padding. But over time, it became freeing. I didn't need advanced English. I needed functional emotional sentences. I feel overwhelmed. I need help. I don't understand yet. These phrases became tools, not weaknesses. Neuroscience shows that naming emotions lowers cortisol, the stress hormone. Lower stress improves language access. This creates a feedback loop. Clearer emotions lead to better English. Better English leads to less conflict. Less conflict leads to safer communication. Pressure didn't disappear. but it became manageable. I also noticed how American couples handle responsibility. Tasks are discussed openly. Who does what? When? Why? There is less assumption, more agreement. This system reduces conflict, but only if both people speak up. Silence is interpreted as consent. If you're quiet because of language barriers, you may accidentally agree to things you didn't choose. So I practiced something difficult. I practiced saying no in English. Gently. Clearly. Without apology. I can't do that today. I need support. These sentences felt heavy in my mouth at first. But they protected the marriage. Linguists call this pragmatic competence, knowing how to use language to manage real-life relationships. It's often more important than grammar accuracy. And marriage is the ultimate practice environment. High stakes. Real consequences. Immediate feedback. Over time, something surprising happened. Pressure didn't weaken the relationship. It strengthened it. Because we learned to build systems, not just feelings. We learned to slow down language instead of emotions. We learned that marriage in America is less about being understood automatically, and more about explaining yourself patiently. If you're learning English and navigating marriage, especially under stress, don't aim for perfect expression. Aim for repeatable honesty. Simple sentences. Clear needs. Calm pauses. Marriage under pressure doesn't require better love. It requires better communication habits. And habits can be learned, slowly, imperfectly, together. By the end of that month, our marriage wasn't lighter. But it was steadier. And steadiness, I learned, is what carries love through pressure without breaking it. Family without noise. Have you ever walked into a house that was completely quiet and felt unsure whether you were welcome, or just early? That feeling followed me for weeks in America. Not because I was unwelcome, but because family here speaks in a different volume. Lower. Softer. Sometimes almost invisible. And if you grew up believing that family means noise, this silence can feel like loss. In many cultures, family is loud by default. Voices overlap. Advice arrives uninvited. Love announces itself. In the US, especially in colder regions and suburban life, family is quieter. Doors close gently. Schedules are respected. Everyone has their own space. At first, I mistook this for distance. Later, I realized it was a different language of care. This matters deeply when you're learning English. Because family is usually where language feels safe. When that safety sounds different, your brain hesitates. You don't know when to speak. You don't know if you're interrupting. You don't know if silence means peace or problem. Psychologists call this ambiguity stress. When social cues are unfamiliar, the brain works harder to interpret meaning. That extra effort drains energy you would normally use to form sentences, remember words, or speak confidently. You feel tired, not stupid. But many learners confuse the two. I noticed this during family gatherings. Small ones. A few people. No one competing for attention. Conversations happened one at a time. When someone finished speaking, there was a pause. A real pause. No one rushed to fill it. That pause felt heavy to me. Like I was expected to perform. But I wasn't. American family culture often treats silence as respect. Letting someone finish. Letting thoughts settle. Not jumping in. This creates a calm environment, but it also removes cues learners rely on. In louder cultures, you learn by immersion. Here, you learn by intention. One evening, we sat together after dinner. No TV. No phones. Just quiet. I waited for conversation to start. It didn't. Everyone seemed comfortable. I felt restless. My brain whispered. Say something. Anything. But I didn't know what level was appropriate. This is where many learners shut down. They wait too long. Then the moment passes. Then they blame their English. But the issue isn't vocabulary. It's timing. Communication research shows that in low-noise environments, turn-taking becomes more explicit. People speak when they choose to, not when space appears. This means learners must claim space gently. Not interrupt. Not wait for rescue. Just step forward. So I tried something small. I spoke one sentence. Slowly. I'm still getting used to how quiet. Evenings are here. The room didn't react dramatically. No big responses. Just nods. A smile. Someone said, "Yeah, it's calm." That was it. But something changed inside me. I had entered the space. Without breaking it. That sentence became a model. Observational. Honest. Not demanding. Linguists would call this low imposition speech. It fits American family dynamics well. You're not asking for attention. You're offering information. I also noticed how affection shows up differently. Less physical. Less verbal. More practical. Someone brings you a blanket. Leaves coffee ready. Fixes something without announcing it. For learners, this can feel emotionally confusing. You don't hear "I care," so you assume absence. But care is happening, just off stage. This affects language. Learning in subtle ways. When emotional feedback is indirect, learners may doubt themselves. They seek verbal confirmation. But American families often assume you know. They don't narrate love constantly. Understanding this reduces anxiety, and anxiety reduction improves language output. There's also a strong emphasis on independence. Even within families, adults are expected to manage their emotions privately. This doesn't mean isolation. It means responsibility. If you need something, you say it. If you don't, silence is acceptable. For English learners, this is both challenging and empowering. Challenging, because no one pulls words out of you. Empowering, because no one judges your quiet either. I practiced speaking in these quiet spaces. One sentence at a time. No stories. No explanations. Just presence. I'm tired today. I like the food. Tomorrow might snow. These sentences grounded me. They weren't impressive, but they were real. Language acquisition research shows that frequent, low-stakes output builds confidence faster than rare, high-stakes performance. Quiet families provide that environment, if you stop expecting noise as validation. I also learned to listen differently. In quiet families, what's not said often matters more than what is. Tone, timing, eye contact. This sharpened my listening skills. My English comprehension improved not because people spoke more, but because I paid more attention. If you're learning English in a family environment that feels too quiet, don't assume you're failing. You're being trusted. Trusted to speak when ready. Trusted to manage your space. Trusted to grow without supervision. Family without noise doesn't mean family without warmth. It means warmth without announcement. By the end of those weeks, the quiet didn't scare me anymore. It felt stable. Like a room that holds you without shaking. And in that stillness, my English found room to breathe. Learning English through pain. Have you ever noticed that the English you remember best is not from textbooks, but from moments that hurt a little? The sentences tied to embarrassment, loneliness, or quiet frustration somehow stay longer. I didn't plan to learn English this way, but America taught me something unexpected. Pain is not an obstacle to learning. It's a shortcut, if you don't run from it. Most people try to learn English when they feel motivated, confident, and comfortable. That sounds logical. But the brain doesn't work that way. Neuroscience shows that emotional intensity strengthens memory encoding. When something matters emotionally, good or bad, your brain tags it as important. That's why you remember arguments clearly but forget small talk easily. During these weeks, my strongest English memories came from uncomfortable moments. Ordering something wrong. Misunderstanding a question. Not knowing how to respond. Emotionally. Those moments stung, but they also burned language into my mind. One afternoon, someone asked me a simple question, "Are you okay?" I froze. Not because I didn't know the words, but because I didn't know which truth to choose. In my native language, I could soften the answer. In English, it felt binary. Yes or no. I said, "I'm fine." But I wasn't. That sentence stayed with me. All day. Pain often appears when language lacks nuance. And that gap is painful because it hides parts of you. Psychologists call this emotional constriction, the inability to express internal states accurately. For language learners, this is common. You're not less emotional. You're temporarily less articulate. Instead of avoiding these moments, I started collecting them. I wrote down sentences I wished I had said. I'm not okay, but I don't know how to explain. I'm tired in a deep way. These weren't advanced phrases. But they were honest. And honesty makes language stick. Language acquisition research confirms this. Emotionally relevant self-generated sentences create stronger neural pathways than repeated neutral phrases. When you create language to represent your inner state, your brain treats it as survival relevant. It remembers. I stopped chasing fluency and started chasing accuracy of feeling. If I could name what hurt, even simply, that was progress. I feel disconnected. I feel slow today. These sentences became anchors. They grounded me in English instead of leaving me stranded. Pain also slowed me down, and that helped. When you're uncomfortable, you pay attention. You listen more carefully. You notice tone. You notice pauses. My listening skills improved because I needed understanding, not entertainment. I listened to slow English stories at night, not to relax, but to feel less alone. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough. And enough is all the brain needs to build patterns. Studies show that comprehension at 60 to 80% is ideal for learning. Pain pushed me into that zone naturally. There's also something important about practicing English when you don't feel confident. It trains emotional resilience. Each time I spoke imperfectly and survived, my brain updated its prediction. This is safe. Safety is the foundation of learning. Without it, progress collapses. One evening, I spoke English out loud about something that hurt, alone in the room. Slowly. Broken sentences. No audience. That practice mattered more than any conversation. Linguists call this private speech. And it plays a key role in internalizing language. It's where thinking and speaking meet. Pain made my English simpler. And simpler made it clearer. I stopped hiding behind complex structures. I used present tense. Short sentences. Real verbs. That kind of English works everywhere, in relationships, work, and life. Culturally, Americans respect emotional honesty, but they expect it to be verbalized. Pain that stays silent often goes unnoticed. Learning to speak discomfort, even gently, is a survival skill here. And English became the tool for that. If you're learning English and feeling discouraged, ask yourself this: what emotion am I avoiding naming? Start there. That sentence, whatever it is, will be more valuable than 10 perfect ones. Pain is not failure feedback. It's information. It tells you where meaning lives. And language grows best where meaning is strong. By the end of that month, my English didn't sound smooth. But it sounded true. And truth is the kind of language that changes you. Small habits save me. Have you ever noticed that big motivation speeches feel powerful, but only for about 20 minutes? Then life returns, quiet and heavy, and your English feels just as far away as before. That's exactly where I was in America. No crisis. No breakdown. Just slow erosion. And what saved me wasn't passion. It was habits so small they almost felt pointless. In winter, especially during those weeks leading up to Christmas, energy disappears without asking permission. Days are short. Nights are long. The brain looks for comfort, not challenge. This is when most people stop practicing English, not dramatically, but gradually. One missed day becomes 3. 3 becomes a week. And then quitting feels easier than restarting. Behavioral psychology explains this well. The brain resists tasks that feel vague, endless, or emotionally heavy. Learn English is all 3. But the brain accepts tasks that feel specific, short, and familiar. So I stopped telling myself I was learning English. I told myself I was doing one small thing. Every morning, before checking my phone, I spoke one English sentence out loud. Just one. About anything. It's cold again. I slept badly. Today feels long. That's it. No correction. No improvement plan. This is called habit anchoring, connecting a new behavior to an existing routine. It lowers resistance because the decision is already made. At first, it felt stupid. But habits don't work because they feel impressive. They work because they bypass emotion. Motivation fluctuates. Habits persist. I added another rule, 5 minutes of listening, once a day. Not more. Never more. Because once you allow more, the brain negotiates. Let's do it later. 5 minutes feels harmless. And research confirms this. Short, daily exposure beats long, irregular sessions for language retention. I listened while doing nothing else. No multitasking. No scrolling. Just sound. Slow English. Real voices. Stories about normal life. My brain stopped fighting because the commitment was tiny. But something interesting happened. 5 minutes often turned into 10, not because I forced it, but because I wanted to stay. Another habit saved me emotionally. Every night, I wrote one English sentence about the day. One sentence. Honest. No grammar checking. Today felt heavy. I missed home. I didn't speak much. This is expressive writing, a technique proven to reduce stress and improve cognitive clarity. Writing gave my thoughts shape. English became a container instead of a barrier. Small habits also helped my speaking confidence. I chose one phrase per week and used it everywhere. One week it was, I'm still learning. Another week it was, give me a second. These phrases reduced anxiety instantly. When you have default sentences ready, your brain doesn't panic. It knows what to say while searching for the next word. Linguists call these formulaic chunks. They are processed faster than constructed sentences and free up mental resources. Native speakers use them constantly. Learners often underestimate their power. I also stopped measuring progress emotionally. I measured it behaviorally. Did I speak one sentence today? Did I listen for 5 minutes? If yes, it was a good day. Even if I felt tired. Even if I felt lonely. This reframed success. Progress became binary, not emotional. One of the most important habits was walking while listening. Slow walks. Cold air. English in my ears. Movement improves memory. Consolidation. Studies show that light physical activity increases attention and reduces stress hormones. Walking turned listening into something my body welcomed instead of resisted. I noticed my pronunciation improving, not because I practiced it directly, but because my ears got better. Habits trained perception first. Output followed naturally. This is how language actually works. Small habits also protected my marriage. When energy was low, we didn't try to talk everything out. We shared one sentence. 1 check-in. I'm low today. I don't have many words. This prevented emotional build-up. Language stayed functional, not overwhelming. American culture respects consistency more than intensity. Showing up matters more than showing off. These habits fit that rhythm. Quiet. Reliable. Unremarkable. But they worked. There were days I felt no improvement at all. And then one day, I answered a question without translating in my head. That moment didn't feel dramatic. It felt normal. That's how habits change you. They make growth invisible until it's unavoidable. If you're learning English and feel stuck, don't look for a breakthrough. Look for a routine you can keep on your worst day. 5 minutes. 1 sentence. 1 phrase. That's enough. Small habits don't inspire. They rescue. They carry you when motivation leaves. They keep the door open until confidence walks back in on its own. Those habits saved me, not by making me fluent, but by making me consistent. And consistency is the quiet force behind every real transformation. Warmth is not weather. Have you ever felt cold even when the heater is on, the lights are warm, and everything around you looks fine? That was the moment I finally understood something important in America. Warmth is not weather. It's not temperature. It's not even people. Warmth is something your brain decides to allow, or not. And this realization changed how I learned English. How I survived winter, and how I stopped waiting for the outside world to fix what was happening inside. During my first weeks here, I kept checking the forecast like it owed me something. If the sun came out, I felt hopeful. If it snowed, my motivation dropped. I thought warmth would arrive with better weather, better conversations, better English. But that day never came. What came instead was a quiet understanding. I was outsourcing my comfort. Psychology calls this external regulation, depending on outside conditions to manage internal states. It's common during big transitions. New country. New language. New identity. You look for signs that you're okay. And when you don't see them, you shrink. In America, especially in winter, the environment doesn't reassure you. People assume self-regulation. You're expected to manage your emotions, your goals, your growth. This can feel cruel at first. But it also contains a powerful lesson. If warmth doesn't come to you, you build it. One evening, I noticed something strange. The temperature outside hadn't changed, but I felt calmer. More grounded. My English felt easier, not better, but lighter. I wasn't fighting it. I wasn't chasing progress. I was just present. That's when it hit me. Warmth had nothing to do with the weather. It came from alignment. Neuroscience supports this. When your actions match your values, the brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals associated with safety and motivation. You don't need external comfort when internal signals say, I'm doing what matters. I stopped asking, is this environment warm enough for me to grow, and started asking, what small action would create warmth right now? Sometimes it was speaking one honest sentence in English. Sometimes it was listening to a familiar voice. Sometimes it was doing nothing and letting silence be okay. American culture quietly rewards this. People don't rescue you, but they respect you when you self-regulate. When you don't complain about the cold, but dress for it. When you don't wait for perfect conditions, but adapt. That mindset applies directly to language learning. I noticed that people who improved fastest weren't the most social or confident. They were the most self-directed. They didn't wait for encouragement. They created rhythm. Warmth followed rhythm. I began associating English with comfort, not struggle. I chose voices I liked. Stories that felt human. I practiced in places where I felt safe, even if no one was around. Language stopped being a test and became a companion. There's a psychological concept called affective ownership, when you feel something belongs to you emotionally. Once English felt like mine. Not something I was chasing approval through, my resistance disappeared. I wasn't learning to impress anyone. I was learning to stay connected, to life, to love, to myself. This also changed how I experienced loneliness. I didn't try to escape it anymore. I warmed it. I spoke to it. I named it. I feel alone tonight. That sentence didn't solve anything, but it softened the edges. Warmth often begins with acknowledgement. I saw this reflected everywhere in American life. People create warmth intentionally. Coffee rituals. Seasonal lights. Personal routines. Warmth is designed, not assumed. That's why holidays matter so much here. They are not spontaneous. They are structured warmth. Once I understood that, Christmas made more sense. It wasn't about joy falling from the sky. It was about people choosing light in darkness. Choosing connection in cold. Choosing meaning in quiet. I applied the same principle to English. I stopped waiting to feel ready. I chose consistency. I stopped waiting to feel confident. I chose honesty. Warmth followed choice, not the other way around. There were still cold days. Quiet days. Lonely moments. But they didn't scare me anymore. I wasn't asking them to change. I was changing my relationship with them. If you're learning English and waiting for motivation, confidence, or perfect conditions, stop waiting. Build warmth where you are. One sentence. One habit. One honest moment. That's how real progress happens. Warmth is not weather. It's permission. Permission to be imperfect. To be slow. To be present. And once you give yourself that permission, learning stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like home. By the end of that week, winter was still winter. But I wasn't cold anymore. A different Christmas morning. Christmas morning in America did not look like the movies. There was no loud laughter, no crowded kitchen, no feeling that something magical had already arrived before I woke up. Instead, there was silence. Soft light through the window. Snow resting on parked cars, like it had nowhere else to be. And me, awake earlier than usual, lying still. Listening to a quiet I had never associated with Christmas before. In my home country, Christmas morning meant noise. Even if your family wasn't religious, the day itself carried energy. People woke up late, talked loudly, shared food, shared stories. Warmth felt automatic. In America, that morning felt optional. If you didn't build it yourself, it simply wouldn't appear. At first, that realization hurt. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in my hand, scrolling without purpose. Social media was full of smiling families, matching pajamas, perfect breakfasts. It triggered the familiar thought, I am doing this wrong. That comparison made the room feel colder, even though the heater was working fine. But something shifted when I stopped fighting the quiet. Instead of rushing to fill it, I let it sit. I made coffee slowly. I watched the steam rise. I noticed how calm my body felt. That was new. For the first time, Christmas morning wasn't about expectations, it was about awareness. This is something many immigrants experience, but rarely talk about. The first holiday where you realize no one is responsible for your emotional experience, but you. That sounds heavy, but it's also freeing. There was no schedule to follow, no tradition to perform, no role to play. Just a morning. Just me. I decided to do one small thing differently. I spoke out loud, in English. Not for practice, not for improvement, but to hear a human voice in the room. I said simple sentences. It's Christmas morning. I'm making coffee. The snow is quiet. Today. The words felt grounding, like placing objects gently on a table. Language learning experts often talk about immersion, but they rarely mention emotional immersion. Speaking English in that moment wasn't about grammar. It was about presence. My brain wasn't stressed. It wasn't performing. It was simply connecting sound to reality. That's one of the most effective learning states. According to cognitive psychology, low pressure, high awareness. As the morning went on, I realized something important. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness has tension. Aloneness can have peace. The difference is intention. That Christmas morning, I wasn't waiting to be invited into someone else's warmth. I was allowing my own. American culture, especially during holidays, often assumes emotional independence. People don't check on you unless you ask. At first, this feels like neglect. Later, you see it as trust. Trust that you can manage your inner world. Trust that you will reach out if you need connection. I went for a short walk outside. The neighborhood was quiet, but not empty. Lights were on behind windows. Somewhere, a family was opening gifts. Somewhere else, someone was also alone, doing exactly what I was doing, figuring it out. That thought made me feel strangely connected. When I came back inside, I listened to a short English story. Not a lesson. A story. I let it play while I cleaned, while I breathed, while the day unfolded. This became one of my favorite Christmas memories, not because it was exciting, but because it was honest. That morning taught me that holidays don't give meaning, you assign it. If you expect the day to carry you emotionally, you might feel disappointed. But if you choose one small ritual, one intentional moment, the day softens. It becomes yours. Many English learners struggle during holidays because routines disappear. Classes stop. Partners travel. Motivation drops. But holidays are actually powerful learning moments if you approach them differently. Lower pressure. More reflection. More listening. More feeling. Your brain remembers language better when it's tied to real emotion. By noon, I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't joyful either. I was steady. And steadiness, I learned, is underrated. It's the emotional state where growth happens quietly. Where confidence builds without noise. That Christmas morning didn't change my life dramatically. But it changed my relationship with being alone. I stopped seeing it as a failure and started seeing it as a skill. A skill you can learn. A skill that transfers to language, to relationships, to self-trust. If you're spending a holiday alone while learning English, know this, you are not missing the point. You are learning a deeper one. You are learning how to be present without permission. How to create meaning without an audience. How to speak, even if no one is listening. That morning, Christmas wasn't loud. It wasn't shared. But it was real. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need to move forward. Quiet proof that you're stronger than you thought, and more capable of warmth than you ever realized. You are not late. There is a quiet sentence I wish someone had said to me earlier, back when everything felt slow, heavy, and uncertain. You are not late. Not late to success. Not late to language. Not late to life. That sentence didn't arrive as advice. It arrived as a realization, after months of comparison, self-doubt, and silent pressure to catch up in America. In the US, time feels aggressive. People talk about age, milestones, progress, and productivity as if life were a race with visible checkpoints. You're supposed to speak confidently, adapt quickly, and show results. When you're learning English, that pressure doubles. Every pause feels like failure. Every accent feels like delay. Every mistake feels like proof that you started too late. I carried that belief quietly. I believed I was behind. Behind native speakers. Behind younger learners. Behind people who seemed to absorb language effortlessly. And that belief affected everything, how I spoke, how I listened, how I showed up in conversations. I wasn't just learning English. I was apologizing through it. But here's the truth most people don't tell you. Language doesn't operate on a universal clock. It follows readiness, not deadlines. Your brain integrates language when conditions are right, emotionally, cognitively, socially. If those conditions weren't there before, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you were preparing. In neuroscience, there's a concept called latent learning. It refers to knowledge acquired without immediate performance. Your brain is collecting patterns, sounds, structures, quietly. Progress happens long before it becomes visible. Most learners quit right before that visibility arrives. I noticed this one afternoon while speaking. I wasn't fluent. I wasn't smooth. But I wasn't afraid. The words came slower than I wanted, but they came without resistance. That's when it clicked. Speed is not the same as readiness. And readiness is what actually matters. America taught me this indirectly. I saw people change careers at 40. Start families later. Redefine success multiple times. Despite the loud culture of early achievement, there's an equally strong undercurrent of reinvention. People don't talk about it loudly, but they live it. Language learning fits into that same pattern. You don't miss your window. You build a new one. Adults learn differently, not worse. With more context, more intention, more emotional depth. When adults learn English through real experiences, love, loss, migration, identity, it sticks in a way textbooks can't replicate. I stopped asking, why am I not fluent yet? And started asking, what am I more aware of now than before? The answers surprised me. I understood tone better. I read between lines. I noticed emotion in language. These aren't beginner skills. They're advanced, but invisible. Comparison is the enemy of sustainable progress. On YouTube, social media, and even in classrooms, you see highlight reels. Fast learners. Perfect accents. Confident speakers. What you don't see is their starting point. Their support systems, their internal battles. You're comparing your process to someone else's performance. When you believe you're late, you rush. When you rush, you tense. When you tense, your brain goes into survival mode, and learning slows down. Ironically, the belief that you're behind is often the very thing holding you back. Once I released that belief, my English improved, not dramatically, but steadily. I listened better. I spoke more honestly. I stopped trying to sound advanced and focused on sounding real. That authenticity created connection. Connection created confidence. Confidence created flow. This is why so many English learners make real progress later than expected. Not because they suddenly got smarter, but because they stopped fighting time. They accepted their pace. And pace is power when it's consistent. If you're watching this and feeling behind, let me say this clearly, you are not late. You're early in your own timeline. The fact that you're still here, still listening, still trying, that's evidence of alignment, not failure. Language is not a race, it's a relationship. And relationships deepen with patience. Not pressure. You don't rush trust. You build it. The same applies to English. Every sentence you understand, every word you use correctly, every moment you don't give up, that's progress. Even if no one applauds. By the time I understood this, something else happened. I stopped measuring my worth through fluency. I stopped using English as proof of intelligence or value. It became a tool, not a verdict. And once that shift happened, learning became lighter. This story doesn't end with fluency. It ends with permission. Permission to learn slowly. To speak imperfectly. To grow quietly. To arrive when you arrive. So if today feels like another slow day, another confusing lesson, another moment where you wonder if it's too late, remember this, growth is not loud. Readiness is not obvious. And you are exactly where you need to be. You are not late. You are becoming. And maybe the real question is no longer, how fast are you learning English? But can you keep going, even when you feel completely alone? I came to the United States. I went through a cold winter. A silent Christmas. A season where I felt slower than the world around me. And that was when I finally understood something important. English is not just a language. It is a bridge back to yourself. If you are listening to this video late at night, in a quiet room, feeling like you are falling behind, then maybe this story was made for you. Because learning English through real stories is not for people who rush. It is for people who move slowly, but keep moving. If you want to practice real English listening, reading, and speaking slowly. If you want to learn English through real-life stories in the US. If you are tired of pressure, fear, and feeling left behind. Subscribe to this channel now and turn on notifications. Because the next videos will go deeper into love, marriage, and family life in America. Cultural differences, climate, and everyday American life. And how adults can learn English naturally through emotion and real experience. The next video will begin with a harder question than today's. If no one understands you, would you still try to speak English? That is all for today. I will make many more videos like this in the future. Please subscribe to watch them.